Good evening. Welcome to tonight's talk, Kenneth Williams, Becoming a Cult. My name is Nikki Smith. I work for Westminster Libraries. I'm very pleased tonight to have Adam Endacott, who's the author of 2 books on Kenneth Williams and uber fan. This is the second talk we've had about Kenneth Williams, which really just goes to show what a fantastic career he had and just still how much there is to talk about. I mean, I'm sure people will be asking for more after this one. Little housekeeping note, you'll see at the bottom of the screen a Q&A symbol. Just please post any questions or comments in there. Last time we talked about Kenneth Williams, we had some great reminiscences, and we even had somebody who had known him quite well posting in there. So hopefully we'll get some more of that. Okay, over to you, Adam.
And there I am. Welcome everybody. I'm Adam Endacott. I'm author of both the Kenneth Williams Companion and the Kenneth Williams Scrapbook, and my thanks to the City of Westminster Libraries and Archive for inviting me to speak yet again, so that's very brave of them. Declaring himself a cult in his own lifetime, this presentation will take a look at what made Kenneth Williams so in his 40-year career and showcase the many faces of Kenneth. So there he is, and here we have a selection of portraits from 1948 onwards, and we can certainly see the changing and aging face of Kenneth here. But what you can see, that what didn't change, was his dress code, which was always pretty much a shirt and tie. So for those of you, well, I'm presuming that people who are joining know who Kenneth Williams is, but just in case you don't, here's just a brief recap for those watching and not familiar with Kenneth. So he was an actor, film star, broadcaster, director, author, writer, diarist and raconteur. And I've just pulled out a few of the main points about him. So he was born in 1926, was in the Combined Service Entertainment in 46-47 as part of his wartime service. He then went into repertory theatre, and his first film was Trent's Last Case in 1952. St. Jane from 1954 was his big West End breakthrough, and in the same year was Hancock's Half Hour, and then there were successful series such as Beyond Our Ken and Round the Horn, the Carry On films, Just a Minute, Jack and Nori, and he wrote his autobiography, Just Williams, in 1985 and died in 1988. I didn't really realise when I was compiling this together how nice round figures it was. So for Beyond Our Ken and Round the Horn was a nice 10 years. The Carry-Ons was a good 20 years, as was Just a Minute. So it's quite interesting when you see it all in black and white there. So that was Kenneth the person. So how does this all transition into becoming a cult? So the OED defines a cult as something popular or fashionable among a particular group of people, which can be applied so readily to Kenneth. And here he is on Fireform in 1985 on Wogan, exclaiming his status.
It's funny, isn't it? This new book of yours, you call it Just Williams.
Yes, I was going to call it A Cult Chronicle, the chronicle of a cult, because I am a cult figure, you see, I'm an enormous cult. I am, I'm one of the biggest cults you'll get round here, I am an enormous cult. And I thought of calling it that, the publishers didn't approve. And then I thought of Scene Drops, because I'd done acid drops and I'd done that drop. And I thought Scene Drops could be good scenes from your life. And they said, no, we've had this phone call from Russell, and he said, call it Just Williams, because Just William was a naughty boy, and there's a lot of things in this book that are naughty.
Were you a great fan of the Just William books? Did you read, like me, all those William books?
Yes, I've done them on recordings. I've recorded the whole series of books, Just William, doing all the voices.
Were you a naughty boy yourself? Though?
Yes, there are various examples in the book of my naughtiness. I think half of it's really a form of aggression. You know, I mean, that's to say, you can either be aggressive physically, or you can be aggressive with words. And I think that I used as a form of self-defense, if you like, you see.
So what actually makes a cult and the stages for someone to demonstrate to be one? There is familiarity, popular and fashionable, behaviour, the best of its kind, and identity and brand. I will now go through these stages as we find out what made Kenneth so unique. Familiarity. So Kenneth was a familiar face with audiences, and what came with that familiarity was an expectation for him to perform and be what is often described by many as his outrageous self. With many appearances on the chat show circuit, routines and stories became a standard, as demonstrated in 1973 for Russell Harty Plus.
Oh, this is nice. It's not PVC. It's not PVC, is it? I hope it's not. You know, it sticks to your bum. It's dripping. Oh no! I'm sorry. I realised it is real calf, isn't it? Leather.
It is, yes.
You do yourselves well here, don't you? Nice. I like all that ritzy stuff.
You do?
Yes.
And the PVC would reappear 13 years later in 1986 for Joan Rivers' Can We Talk?
How nice to meet you.
Thank God it's not PVC I'm sitting on. I can't stand that stuff, and so often you get PVC to sit on, and I have to be very careful, as you probably know. Yes, I've been in three times for the operations, you know.
And are you
on the nether regions.
okay now?
Not really, no. I suffer very badly from wind. Very badly. A lot of Bicidol and stuff like that.
There were also the familiar stories, of which there were many, but we didn't tire of hearing them. The tale of Orson Welles' production Moby Dick was a clear winner, normally, but outside his career was his family and the memories of his old man's barber shop, described first here in Comet Roots in 1983.
My father had no time for anything fancy, you know. I mean, a man I remember once came into the shop. Oh, I'd like a blow wave. And he said, blow? You'll get no blow waves from me. I'm not doing no blow waves. What are you, blooming iron? Iron off? Iron? I'm not having no irons in my shop. Get out. Have a straightforward haircut or nothing. And women, you know, he was tactless. I mean, I was always staggered that he made any success at all as a barber, because I remember a woman saying, I'd like a henna dye. And he said, henna? On your face? A henna? You look like a tart. You want to look like a tart? Oh, no, I don't. Well, then don't have it. He laid the law down all the time. My mother used to take the cash in the gents, you know. She said, sometimes I'm the shampoo girl, but most of the time she would take money in the gents. Yes. And one of the customers, he said to me, I was there, he said, you know, she's got that little television so that we could watch the racing. So I said to her, you know, that's too small. You want to get the new Echo model. Lovely, is 17-inch console. He said, and your mother turned around, she said, oh, 17 inches, you console anyone. He said, we all laughed. You don't expect to hear that. He said, do you, from a venerable, grey-haired old lady? I said, no. And he said, she's not typical, my mother.
That same year, he had retold the memories to Derek Beatty for Look Who's Talking, but as you'll notice, with a change to the end of the story.
And I used to go to that shop and see him coping with customers, and I was always amazed he had any. Because I'd see a woman say, well, I'd like a henna dyed. You see Charles. My old man was Charlie Williams. They always called him Charles. Charles, I'd like henna dyed. And he said, henna? On you look like a tart. Want to look like a tart? You want to look like a tart? Oh, I'll do it. If you want to look like a tart, I'll do it. Just go around the street, be laughed at. And they're, what do you think? And they would immediately talked out of it. They had no diplomacy whatsoever. No charming madam come this way. No, what your hair done? Sit down. Like that. Terribly rude.
Was he Cockney, though? I mean,
yeah,
he didn't have a Welsh...
And one, he did a gents' saloon as well. Had a gents' saloon with 2 assistants in there. He'd sometimes help out in there. He helped out there one day when a man came in. And this man said, I'd like a blow wave. And he said, blow? I'll give you a blow wave. You get no blow wave in here. You're iron off. Because anyone was a puff with iron off. He was iron.
Yes.
Out. And he chucked him out. The man landed on the bum on the pavement and didn't get a blow wave at all. Really? And he thought that was disgraceful. A man to have a blow wave. He used to have a short back sides and straight. You know? I suppose I've inherited a lot of that, because I despise, you know, any kind of affectation. I just let my hair. Yes, you feel that. She felt that, she said.
And here is a photo of Charlie Williams' barber shop on the right at 57 Marchmont Street, simply called D. Simon's Hairdressers, the Marchmont Toilet Salon. In 1939, it's interesting to note that Kenneth stepsister Pat was an apprentice hairdresser. And now time for a commercial break.
I have central heating, as you know. I can't afford to keep it on.
What we have here is a failure to insulate.
But who can I trust?
BP. They'll solve all your home insulation problems.
Heat save.
Save heat, save money. What we have here is the reason to insulate.
trouble is tempting them down here.
That BP Heat Save advert was from 1981 and was a recent discovery which I made. His first visual advert rather than just his voice. We return back to the stages of a cult and the turn of popular and fashionable. I think Kenneth remained both, and his popularity can be seen clearly from the opening to An Audience With.
Hello. Lovely to see you all. May I say what an honour it is for you to have me. Good night.
To remain fashionable and popular, you need to know and read your audiences and fit in with the culture. When Kenneth was asked about going to Hollywood on Wogan in 1987, this was his reply.
No, I belong here. I belong here. I'm very much a product.
It'd be good in Hollywood, wouldn't it?
Yes, excellent.
No, I'm very much a product of this country. You see, we have an Anglo-Saxon, then influenced by Norman, so an Anglo-Saxon and French influence, and that is the one where I can use myself, so to speak, to the best of my ability, plus the fact that I know people here. I mean, they know me, and I know them, and therefore there is a relationship. I mean, actually, when I went to Australia, I thought this is going to be death. Because nobody knows, you know. I'm going to sign all these books. And they had these book signing sessions where I had to go and sign my books, you see.
I belong here, and indeed he did, earning national treasure status as well, and even more so, almost 35 years after his death. As a popular figure, you often appear regularly on television, and Kenneth was a staple part of TVAM Good Morning Britain. Here he is, having some fun in the kitchen with Rusty Lee. Although apologies for the sound quality on this clip in advance.
I mean, I really should have an apron on, Rusty, shouldn't I?
Yes.
I mean, I'm not prepared
Well, go the whole hog.
studio to come to your kitchen set.
Well,
what do you want me to actually do?
Well, let me say, you're very welcomed into the kitchen. I'm sure we're going to have a bit of fun in here today.
You see what I'm making, you see? It's just an ordinary laugh.
I think I've got to bake it. I don't mind breaking an egg or two, but I haven't got to actually toss it, because I'm no good at tossing at all.
Behaviour, and we saw some there, is our next stage on the cult status. And Kenneth certainly behaved differently in varying situations, and more so in the later part of his life. We begin with his traits of being able to shock an audience, make them laugh, and dominate the screen, with this clip from Wogan in 1986.
I've come to say bon voyage to him, and I put in your dressing room a special handbook on Greece.
But
On Greece?
I'm not going to Greece.
No, this is the grease you rub on. You see, if you put on the olive oil, this mild cod liver oil is very good for the skin.
Cod? We
Yes,
haven't
cod.
got any cod here, have we?
No cod?
No.
What you got?
No, what we got is... We got...
Cockles? Oh, cockles. Cockles are delicious. I love a plate of cockles. I love a plate of cockles. They got vinegar on?
Chili vinegar.
They've got vinegar on, that's very good,
Let's
yeah.
see you dance.
I always had these at Lee.
Untouched by a human hand.
Really?
Two girls do it
Well,
with
they
their
have to be
feet.
touched by human hand to be rinsed.
No,
You've got
the
to get
girls
the,
do it with their feet.
you have to get the sand out.
Do you find that they help...
I never bothered with the
They
spoon.
help the lead in the pencil?
Aphrodisiac. Oh, most definitely, yes. They're like oysters.
Oh,
If you don't swallow them quickly, your neck goes stiff.
That's right.
You want to talk more? You want to do the announcement?
Well, I mean... I suppose you are taking over.
Yes, I should show how to do it, right? I shall say, good evening and welcome to the Wogan Show. And when he's gone, you see, I shall be taking over, giving you a potpourri of all that is best in popular culture.
No, please.
Oh, sorry.
No, you'll have to learn.
Oh.
When you do the show, you allow other people to talk.
Oh, I'm not having any of that.
No, so I'm afraid we do have a show to do.
Oh, I see.
Much as I would like you to.
This is the Bum's Rush, is it?
Please, yes.
All right. Well, it couldn't happen to a nicer person.
Thank you very much.
I'll see you.
Kenneth refers to Lee there, where the Williams family would go for day trips and holidays in the late 1920s and early 30s. Now for a complete contrast, when Kenneth could be serious and demonstrate his intellectual side as he discusses biographies, from Read All About It in 1974.
To put it all in, warts and all, when it is accompanied by such a vision, that is to say, the biographer is so much in love with this subject. I remember Elizabeth Longford talking about, actually sleeping in the same cot that Wellington did, to get a feeling, to get the feeling about this man. And the whole book is suffused with a great affection for the character she's writing about. I feel this too with other, good biographers. They do have a great affection for their subject. Therefore, I feel that the warts and all is absolutely right, because it's accompanied by tremendous vision and affection, and therefore we accept it, just like we accept Boswell's portrait of Johnson. We accept it with affection and love. I think when it's done in another way by a rotten biographer, it becomes a list of this is so and that is so, and becomes sort of vaguely unpleasant, and we get the feeling that we're eavesdropping on what we shouldn't be.
Well, from a very serious Kenneth there to an outrageous one, as he is on top form in Give Us a Clue from 1982, demonstrating a variety of behaviours to which an audience was accustomed to.
Kenneth,
well, I hope it's something reasonable, because after all, I need special handling. I'm a cult figure, you understand.
Are you ready?
I hope it's something that's proper, but I don't want a lot of rubbish, I mean? I want something easy and straightforward.
It's yours. Are you ready?
Right. Oh, yes.
It's a film. And a play. And there's how many words? Six words. Right. The is the first word. Man. The man. Most likely. No. Who? The man who. Came to dinner. Talk too much. Talk too much.
You got it straight away, you noticed that?
Yes.
You got it straight away, that's fantastic. It's not a well-known title, is it? Not a well-known title.
Yeah.
You did it very well.
I think you did it wonderful.
There's a remake coming, The Man Who Couldn't Get a Word in Edgeways.
Love.
There he was with the late Lionel Blair, Norman Collier and Fraser Hines representing Michael Aspel. Now to a different kind of behaviour, and what happened when Sally Ann Howes made a gesture in 1986 in Looks Familiar.
Yes, Lisa Minnelli.
Yeah.
Lisa Minnelli, and it must have been, that's the called Cabaret.
Yeah, that's Cabaret.
Cabaret. And who's with Lisa Minnelli?
Joel Grey.
Joel Grey.
No, I don't know that.
Oh,
Can't
he's
be,
wonderful.
can't be anyone very famous about
Oh,
it.
he is.
I'm not touching him. It's very rude.
Can't I touch you?
Now,
I'm not
Sally
allowed
Ann,
to touch
I
you.
think you've got an
I
idea.
came on this programme to touch you.
No, I
Laughed off there by Dennis Norden. Kenneth was a private man and wasn't one for being touched. As we digest all of those clips, time now for another commercial break.
Toby! Young Toby always enjoyed relaxing with a moist, chewy cereal bar called Jump. But when he discovered new Jump in Choc, he felt almost naughty about that coating of real milk chocolate, until a friend showed him that new Jump in Choc has all the wholesome taste of original Jump, but with a little extra welly. Jump bars, they're well worth chewing over.
I don't think they exist anymore. I haven't seen them in the local supermarket. And so now to the best of its kind. And whilst I may be biased here, I think it can be said that Kenneth simply was the best of his kind, a powerhouse of a comedy genius and much more. To demonstrate being the best, we begin with a trip to Pebble Mill in 1980.
I'm not going to ask you to sing tonight.
Oh, yes, that happened the last time. The last chat show I did, they suddenly flung me a load of lyrics and said, that's your song. I said, I beg your pardon, what do you mean, song? And that Parkinson knew that I did sing this song ages before. I was about 74 when I'd done this song. And he said, you can do it. I said, no, it's years since I've done it. I won't remember a word. And he said, oh, it's all right, we'll have it on a board beside the camera. And I was actually forced to get up and sing this song. And the whole point of it was that it was an ordinary lyric consisting of English phrases that were all supposed to sound like a French song, but all the words were in actual fact English words. You know, it was one of those things that ran on histoire qui me pense, faites-vous jouer connaissance, Hammersmith, ta lady danse, au revoir, Mark Craig. Suzette. And of course, they're all things that are in English songs. In fact, it's very interesting. The more familiar the milieu, the more an audience will take to it. If you sang a thing like a German, like Gold und Silber, lieb ich sehr, kann so gut gebrauchen, everyone would know what you were talking about, because gold and silver does sound like gold and silver, doesn't it?
The wireless was Kenneth's favourite medium, and it was with shows such as Round the Horn, which would bring him much popularity. And one of his characters was Round Sid Rumpo. And here he is, performing the Sussex Wordwind song, performed on Friday night, Saturday morning in 1981.
Oh, will you love me, Mary, oh, when my buttocks have bended low, when my orbs grow dim and my pubes be white, and my cord wangle makes an ugly sight, and my buttocks be bending low, my buttocks have bended low. And she sings back to him, you ask me if I love you, oh, when your buttocks have bended low, when your orbs grow dim and your pubes are white, and your cord wangle makes an ugly sight, if I feel the way I do tonight, my answer will still be no.
From the pen of Marty Feldman and Barry Tuck. Now, the next clip is a bit of indulgence of mine, and it is slightly longer, but it is Kenneth demonstrating how to play comedy and put across a comedy number to an audience, and in my mind, is the best of its kind. Here he is with Paul Heine from In at the Deep End in 1982, with Laurie Holloway at the piano.
And neighbours who declare that they're better than you.
Right. So-called.
So neighbours who would look more at home in a zoo.
Yeah, well, you don't have to worry about singing it. You see, you can do so-called friends.
Yes.
So-called friends and neighbours who would look more at home in a zoo. So you can point it if you don't stick strictly to the actual metrical stanzas. You don't have to stick to it. You can depart from them and they can follow you.
Yeah.
It makes me mad to see that Mercedes next to my Ford 8. The only part for which I've paid is just the number plate. You know.
Yes. So I shouldn't sing any of it.
I wouldn't bother, no, because friends perhaps want to borrow a quid. I know just how they'll reply.
Yes. Because those friends and neighbours
will be saying, sorry, can't do. We've got
to go now.
Waving not
one finger, but two.
Yeah, but you're going, but two.
Yes.
Which is ruining your tagline. It's
but
waving
two.
not one finger, but two. Are you going to use a gesture?
I thought I might.
Yes.
That's a good idea, or not?
Yes, waving not one finger but two. I mean, it depends on how rude we want to make it. I mean, if it's not one finger but two. I mean, that's going to be obviously very rude. But if you're going to do the victory sign, it's not one finger.
I thought I sort of.
Well, a big one.
Yes.
Not one finger but two. Yes, that's quite a good idea. Yes. Let's run through it again.
Right.
And think in terms like you were just then of not bothering with sounding like a singer.
Right.
But much more in the nature of conversation.
Right.
Where from?
Let's do it all the way through and see how we get on.
Right, and a real bash.
When you've got friends and neighbours who declare that they're better than you, so-called neighbours who would look more at home in a zoo, it makes me mad to see their Mercedes next to my Ford 8. The only part for which I have paid is just the number plate. And if from friends and neighbours you perhaps want to borrow a quid, I know just how they'll reply. Because those friends and neighbours will be saying, sorry, can't do. We've got to go now. Waving not one finger, but two.
Do you want to give me some advice for the night?
I feel it's fundamental. I think it's psychological to say to yourself, I am superb, and they're extremely lucky to see me here tonight. And I go on with that feeling, good evening, I go on with that feeling of tremendous patronage. I'm doing them all a favour. That's what I think. And with that attitude, I'm all right. If I go on not thinking that, if I go on thinking, oh, they are better than me, will I satisfy them, then I tend to be nervous and tentative and rush it. It's just a question of enjoying it and being expansive. We shall have the tits. And, you know, you can really use them. And it does, they'll know you're enjoying it, and they'll think, oh, yeah, and they'll start to enjoy it as well.
Wish me luck for the night, Kenneth.
Yes, wholeheartedly.
I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. So now on to identity and brand, which is essential for success and association and a key element of cult status. Part of brand Kenneth was creating magnetic characters along with their voices, and he demonstrates them here in 1963.
No, don't be like that. Stop messing about. No, that one. I mean, he's based on a definite character, the characters that I've known in life. I mean, that sort of man was a man who actually smiled all like that, all the time, and always smiling. And if you smile all the time, you talk like that, you see. And the old man in Beyond Dark, that one with no teeth, you know, and always talking like that all the time, is a man who's persecuted, you see. He don't like it. It's not good enough, you know. And look here, who the hell, who don't think you are, you know? We're not, why can't we have a strike? We should all go on strike. You know, it's persecuted, the feeling here.
So brand Kenneth could always be relied on for entertainment and stealing the scene from those around him, as demonstrated here in What's My Line from 1974.
Now, would you say that you've cashed in on your sexiness?
Well, it's not for me to say.
Are you Vanilla Field? This is it. Do you realise it's the first one I've ever got right? I've never got it right.
The moment I heard you win it, darling, I thought, well, there's no point in coming on at all.
Have you worked with him a lot? Yes, a lot of times. Vanilla?
He's allowed me to assist him.
Yes.
Every time I got it right, you know why? Because I remembered. We did a sketch where she had to be this manic housewife who said, oh, I tried. And I heard that timbre. I heard it.
You'd had the flesh.
That's it.
You could have been the fattest man in the world.
That was the sketch where I had to say, I never had the flesh, you see, I never had the flesh. And she had to say, you could have been the fattest man. Do you remember?
Yes.
It got manic. Absolutely manic.
Exhausting.
David Jacobs there trying to maintain control. So brand Kenneth was often at its very best for the programme Just a Minute, where he reigned supreme for 20 years. Here he is in action from the pilot version of the programme in 1969, and see if you can spot his mum Louie in the audience.
They're starting now.
Some of the greatest jokesters in the world stand up.
Sorry, Ken, you've done it. Why?
He said, joke.
Well done, Ken.
Well done, Ken, but I don't know whether
I wasn't quite sure whether it was a joke or jokester.
Yes.
And in so doing, I'm afraid he hesitated. And he...
I'm going to ask the audience to judge because
No, I'll give it to him. No,
Would you really give it to him?
He needs a point.
Oh, no, I don't. He's trying to make it charitable now. Oh, Ricky.
No, we're going to have no charity.
Every time I let it fair. You've got to have rules. You've got to have rules.
Yes. We're having no charity in this case. No. Cut and thrust all the way. The audience will be the judge again.
Yes.
Do you agree with Kenneth's challenge? If you agree, we do cheer. If you disagree, boo, and do it together now. They're with you, Mr. Jokester. You have another point. And you have 1 second left for laughter starting now.
Oh, it's the loveliest thing in the world.
Nicholas Parsons in the chair there with Sheila Hancock and Clement Freud on the panel. I think it's time for another one of those commercial breaks.
Stop wriggling, Arthur. You're getting the garland in a twist.
Sorry, Morris. Nappy's giving me jip.
Doesn't your mum use Super Softies?
Super what?
New Super Softies from Sterling Health. Bigger, softer baby wipes with soothing lanolin to cleanse, protect and care for our skin. Better, Arthur?
On cloud 9, Morris.
New Super Softies with lanolin. Skincare for little cherubs.
So having examined the stages of a cult and benchmarked Kenneth to them, it mustn't be forgotten that he appeared in various series on radio, film and TV, which have now achieved their own cult status. The biggest being the Carry On film series, which is an emotional attachment for audiences carved over developing and changing culture in its 20-year history. Yes, I have left out Columbus before I was shouted at, as it was 4 years after Kenneth's death. I thought it would be fun to go through his characters and the noticeable changes in how Kenneth was used in the film series. So the formative years saw Kenneth's characters as a revolutionary, serious and against the establishment kind, starting in Sergeant as James Bailey, the supercilious university graduate, which evolved into Oliver Rickett for nurse, studying nuclear physics, progressing to Edwin Milton, the English teacher for teacher, and then Constable Stanley Benson for constable. The seriousness remained for Francis Courtney, the multilingual in Regardless, turned to more of a characterization in Cruising as First Officer Leonard Marjoribanks, and then a change in Jack as Captain Fearless, the first figure of authority for Kenneth. With Spying as Desmond Simpkins, Kenneth stepped into the snide persona for this lead role, and then to the start of a historical set of roles outside of the contemporary characters he had played to date, starting with Julius Caesar in Cleo. To the Wild West as Judge Burke in what Kenneth always said was his favourite carry-on, Cowboy, and then playing Dead as Dr. Orlando Watt in Screaming. The character role was firmly established here. Now the figure's authority really took hold from Don't Lose Your Head as Citizen Camembert, as then Follow That Camel as Commandant Maximilian Berger, sporting a German accent, Dr. Kenneth Tinkle in Doctor, and then the native leader, the Kazi Calabar in Up the Khyber. In the cult stakes, the characters slowly evolved into charismatic leaders as Dr. Kenneth Soper in Camping and Dr. Frederick Carver in Again Doctor as the head surgeon. Marriage guidance counselor in Loving as Percival Snooper, playing historical as Thomas Cromwell and Henry, and as owner of the laboratory factory, William C. Boggs in At Your Convenience, more figures of authority. In Matron, he becomes a knight as Sir Bernard Cutting, and back to normality as holiday rep in Abroad as Stuart Farquhar, or alternatively, Stupid What? Nearing the end of his carry-on career, still authoritative figures as Captain Desmond Fancy the Bow Street Runners in Dick, and Professor Roland Crump in Behind, and then a Turner's himself in That's Carry On. His 26th and final carry-on saw a French accent as Emile Prévert, the French ambassador. When seen in their chronological order, it is remarkable to see how the characters and his own stamp on the films changed over the 20 years, yet he will always be associated with "ooh, matron," which leads nicely onto catchphrases. As a cult figure, comes with it familiar and repeated catchphrases which add to the brand and identity. Examples being, "Stop messing about," "Hello, me dearios," "35 years," "Good evening," "The answer lies in the soil," "Frying tonight," "I've come all the way from Great Portland Street," "Bona Tavalia, Dolly Aldeek," and of course, infamy, infamy, they've all got it in for me. It wasn't just his audience he was revered and admired by, but also his peers and contemporaries, which all adds to Kenneth's status as a cult. I was privileged to meet and speak with many, and here are just a few examples of what was said about him. He could always make me collapse with laughter, and I admired his cleverness and knowledge. Nanette Newman, who we saw earlier with them in What's My Line. I learned everything just by watching him, how to look, how to move, and how to cover up when you've forgotten your lines. Lorraine Chase. Kenneth was an amazing man. I never saw him as a character, and I was thrilled to have worked with this magnificent actor, Dame Barbara Windsor, who we saw in the photograph for Karen Abroad. And Kenneth was exceptional and a real-life enhancer, Christopher Biggins. Time for our last commercial break.
Hello, me dearios. Here's a milking ballad to encourage cows to give the buttermilk and butter oil, which when blended with vegetable oil makes delicious St. Ivel gold. If I say it's for St. Ivel, I do hope you understands. Will you look upon me kindly and obliging fill these cans? Yes, I will on one condition. Will you kindly warm your hands?
Low-fat St. Ivel Gold, the best thing from the dairy since butter.
So that was our Kenneth. Here we come to the end of my case for how Kenneth rightly declared himself as a cult in his own lifetime, and certainly beyond. There isn't a week where he hasn't appeared in a newspaper, magazine, TV program, and so on. What a lasting legacy he has given us, and one that can be enjoyed for many decades to come through the preserved recordings and footage. My books celebrating Kenneth and his career have been published by Phantom, the most recent being the Scrapbook, which is an illustrative companion to the Companion. An updated companion is being worked on for release this year, including more projects and updated information. Please do get in touch if you'd like to chat, Kenneth, or have anything that I may not have. And my email is on screen there. And I'm sure if you get in touch with Nikki, she can always pass on messages to me. So thank you for watching, and I very much hope you enjoyed it. Over to Nikki for the Q&A session.
Thank you so much, Adam. That was brilliant. I thought I was fairly familiar, because I'm quite ancient. I thought I was familiar with Ken's chat show appearances. And I have to say, I remember the Russell Harty one, but the rest completely new to me. And I'd actually, the only advert of his I remember, and I'm probably quite a lot of people think that is the Blue Lou one that I think you showed it in the last talk, the one that's by Richard Williams. Okay, just before we start, I'll just say that this is just one in a series of talks that we have for Westminster and Kensington libraries. And one that particularly might appeal to fans of Kenneth Williams is we have one next week on TV cooks, the history called How to Make an Omelette. It's by a friend of Adam's, so we know it's going to be good. Kevin Geddes. Some of you may have seen him do a talk on Fanny Craddock last year, but he's back to talk about the history of TV cookery programs. And we have plenty of other talks, so everyone who booked will get sent links after the event. Okay, so on to the questions, and keep the questions coming, please, because it's always great to have these correspondences. Okay, first one, someone anonymous has said, oh yes, sorry, Felicity says, the BP advert, who was the voiceover? It sounds like William Franklin.
Yes, that was William Franklin, and of course he worked with Kenneth on What's My Line. Yeah,
well done, Felicity. Okay, someone anonymous says, did he prepare for his television appearances, or were they just all, or were the anecdotes off the cuff? Do we know?
They're all definitely off the cuff. I've seen any scripts that well, majority of the scripts at the BBC Written Archives and in the British Library and so on. And he went on, and they were all not scripted at all. So it was all off the top of his head. And it was the interviewers that really liked him coming on, because they knew that they could just wind him up and off he went, and hardly had to get a word in edgeway and ask the questions, because Kenneth was leading the way, which I think famously was said by Parkinson in 1982 for his then last programme, when he said, I think that's quite remarkable, Kenneth, that's about the first time somebody's answered a question for about 2 minutes.
I remember him appearing on Parkinson with Maggie Smith, which is the Joan Rivers one. I think I do remember that. Did she know about him in advance? Was presumably he just her booker got him? Did she know what he was going to be like? Because I seem to remember him being quite outrageous on that one.
Yes, because she did that program with Peter Cook, who was acting as a, I suppose you would say, like a Madge to Dame Edna. So she had Peter Cook to her.
Oh, yes.
And of course, he worked with Peter Cook in review, and then of course the Hand of the Baskervilles. So there would have been that familiarity as well. There was Dudley Moore was also on that program, and they of course knew Peter Cook, and who was in the Hand of the Baskervilles. So at one point, actually in that interview, they actually say, "Oh, it's a bit like This Is Your Life, Kenneth," because of all the people on the panel and what they're talking about. He was actually asked to go over to America and appear on the Jane Rivers show over there after that, so he must have been a smash hit with her at the time for her to then ask for him to come over to the States.
It's just hard to imagine what he'd have been like on a show with, I don't know, whoever would have been, Burt Reynolds or whoever would have been on the show in America. William Godwin asked, do we know what sort of fees he would have been receiving in his later years when he was mostly a talk show star? Did he have a vast wealth that he was living off and therefore didn't need big paying jobs? I seem to remember he moans about money a lot in the diaries, doesn't he?
Yeah, so he very much relied on these sort of little jobs to see him through. I mean, doing the voiceovers for adverts were big money makers for him. So he was comfortable to just go and do these little chat shows and get the odd pound for his pocket money, so to speak. In my book, The Companion, I have detailed where possible his fees for programs as I have found them. They are varying, but once you equate it to the what it is in today's money, he was on a good substantial amount.
Yeah. Yes, and he didn't live a particularly extravagant lifestyle, did he? I mean, he certainly didn't spend money on kind of.
Not at all. He had a very.
Anything.
His flat was very barren. Just had the things that he enjoyed in life. He had his books, his music, and things such as that. He was able to look after his mother, his stepsister Pat. He would also give money to her, and he would always say to her to put in her tax return secretarial services for Kenneth Williams. So he was very generous with his friends and family, and was able to live a comfortable life as well.
Yeah, Laura has a sort of quite touching question, which is, I'm sure you've been asked this many times before, but I wonder what Kenneth would think if he could see how well loved and revered he still is, considering how sad and lonely he felt throughout his life. He truly lived up to the cult status he created for himself, and he has survived so much better than a lot of other comedians of the period. I mean, if you compare him to sort of someone like Benny Hill, who was contemporary of his, because he must have known at the time, he must have had people coming on the street and asking for autographs and things.
Yes, it was very mixed with the autographs, whether you got them on the good day or not. So one day you might be lucky and he might sign it for, and the other day he might be rushing around and then telling you to F off. Sorry, could you just remind me the first part of that question?
What do you think he would have felt if he knew how long his legacy would be?
Oh, right, yes. That's an interesting one, because the way that he viewed his work, such as, say, the Carry On films, he didn't always look at them as works of art. So he probably just did them as a job, a jobbing actor, and then moved on from them. So I would like to think he would be touched and like the attention and that he has reached his cult status. I mean, in a contrast, when I met Stanley Baxter, he sat there and he said, "Oh, he was a forgotten man," and how upset he was about that. And I had to say, "Well, actually, no, you're not, Stanley. There's a whole audience out there who love you. You're not forgotten at all." So I suppose it just varies on the person and how they're feeling at the time.
No, I mean, I love Stanley Baxter, but one of the things you don't get is Stanley Baxter impersonators for obvious reasons. And, you know, there's people who completely make their living out of being Kenneth Williams impersonators, practically. So that's nice. Two sort of similar questions from Mark Shenfield and Phil McCarty. Mark says it's remarkable he stayed doing things for so long. Would you say he fulfilled his potential? I feel he was brilliant, but he could have done much more and maybe more varied roles. And Phil says, I'm always saddened that such an erudite and talented comic fell into such despair. I mean, do you think he could have been a straight actor?
Very much so. I mean, he fell out of love with the theatre because you had to go on there and do it and make it different every night. I mean, his favourite medium was the wireless, so he could just go in, do the job and walk out, and that was it. So having to keep it fresh every night for the theatre was something that he struggled with in later years. And I think also the work that was coming through wasn't really the greatest for him. However, I would like to think that had he been alive a bit longer and was with us now, I mean, be 96, but he would have had something like an Alan Bennett monologue, or been in a BBC Charles Dickens adaptation and things such as that. So I think, I would like to think that over that sort of period that there would have been a change in that, and that he would have gone back to his acting roots and really enjoyed his national treasure status doing things like that on TV.
Because he could have easily had another 20 years of.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I mean, when I think the autopsy said that he had a very healthy, his lungs were clear and he had a very healthy body, so
yes, almost
looked after himself.
Slightly reminded of Felix Aylmer, who he used to do impersonations of, who did have a career that went up to his 80s. Chris Carnegie says his diaries reveal a darker, angrier side. Did he ever reveal that in public during his lifetime?
An angry side, I guess. I mean, there are stories from his friends that when he was in a restaurant, and if he was approached by people, then he wouldn't be very happy because he was in his own space with his friends, so he wasn't there to entertain or speak to people. So there's that side of things, but it mustn't be forgotten that what we see in the diaries is only about 18% of everything that he ever wrote. So we have to remember that how it's been edited, you are seeing the doom and gloom. And very much with Lorraine Chase, I'm trying to change that face that he was a happy person and did enjoy life. And then he was very much loved and enjoyed by his family and friends. So I think we need to remember that whilst how that's been edited, he wasn't Mr. Sado the whole time. And of course, we all have our off days. I mean, I have my off days as well. I mean, you can be happy and sad, and some, I mean, particularly during the pandemic. So I think we also have to remember that what you saw on screen, you also got in life as well. I mean, I've met his friends, and they say how much, how happy he was, and would retell stories and things such that, and he was a pleasure to be with. I mean, of course, he had his off days, and there were times when he could be not so happy.
Is there any chance of more of the diaries coming out, do you think, being published for?
They are currently in the British Library, where they will remain. They're currently being scanned, I understand, as my friend and I are trying to gain access for our research, because my friend Bill Holland, who I hope is watching, is actually writing the diaries as if Kenneth hadn't died. So he's gone from the 15th of April 88 onwards, and hopefully that will be finish this year and find a publisher for that. So keep an eye out for that. And if you want to find out a bit more about that he also wrote a nice piece in my scrapbook.
Yeah, that sounds a great project. Someone anonymous says, do we know much about his political views?
Yes, now, Kenneth didn't keep that quiet. So I expect a lot of people have seen his talking about being in the EU. I think that's gone around Twitter and everything, particularly during Brexit. He appeared on LBC Radio and also the BBC 1 O'Clock News as the advocate for Tories. That was in 86 and 87. So he was pretty much a conservative. I think this also comes across in his diaries as well.
Because the diaries, I think, have some anecdotes which start off slightly unpleasantly about some black neighbours, and then he meets them and they're absolutely fine, which I suspect is probably the case for a lot of people, especially in that period. But
yeah, I mean, it's also the culture they grew up. Yeah, there's
absolutely. But I think when he meets the neighbours, they're absolutely, he's absolutely fine with them. So Dora asks, can you say a bit more about his theatre career?
Yes, so he was in repertory theatre from 48 onwards, predominantly in UK and also in Swansea, where he was with the likes of Wilfrid Bramble, Rachel Roberts, and I expect you probably know that he was with Richard Burton in the Seagull for one production. He did a few bit more touring around the country, and then his actual start in the West End was in 52 with Peter Pan. And he toured with that, which then went on to roles in Henry V, which actually was at the Old Vic. And then there was St. Joan in 1954, which were followed by reviews and a few musicals. There was The Buccaneer, and there's things like Pieces of Eight and One Over the Eight, and of course Share My Letters with Maggie Smith. Then they had more serious ones. So I'm trying to reckon them all off my brain here. And then you had The Private Ear and The Public Eye, going with Maggie Smith, which was a Peter Schaefer show. And then he had Blute, which of course was a pretty disastrous in that instance. Again, where he sort of lost his nerve, but came back to the theatre in 1973 for My Fat Friend. I Have Missed Out the Platinum Cat, which was also there. And then he was on and off in the 70s. He did Signed and Sealed with Peggy Mount, and finished his actual acting career on stage in The Undertaking, which was with Lorraine Chase. Sorry, I probably missed a few out there. And
the Buccaneer, is it The Buccaneer where he's a schoolboy?
Yes, he had to play as schoolboy and sing.
Wow,
yes.
I mean, it's such a shame there's no clips of that survive. Oh, yeah, Anthony Willis asked you, can you say anything about International Cabaret? I remember him talking about that in Round the Horns, boasting about it, but was he just a compere for that?
Yes, and he was a bit apprehensive about doing those to start with, because it was effectively him going out and doing stand-up, which wasn't his bag at all. But it was actually as a compere. So they began at the Talk of the Town in London for the BBC, which is now where the casino is in Leicester Square, and they were broadcast live from Talk of the Town. So he did the 2 series there, and there was quite a few in each of those series, but we've only got a few audio versions, and also there's the clip that was preserved because it was Al McCogan's last actual performance. And then he dipped out, Les Dawson took over, and then he came back in 1974 for International Cabaret. Of course, it was then in colour. And he was a bit more comfortable in those, pretty much because he'd got used to it all and he'd done quite a bit in between. And there, from watching those, you get a better sense that he's enjoying himself more, and he's also got Alan Ainsworth at the piano and things such as that. So yeah, it was, they were a bit of a different kind of program in his career, but I think the public did enjoy it at the time. And then there was also the Meanwhile on BBC Two, which kind of recreated that International Cabaret, but it only lasted for a series. I hope that answered that one all right.
Someone with a great username, Carry On Carstairs, says, thank you for showing the What's My Line clip with another building. That's the first time I've seen her as herself. They seem to get on very well in the clip, but apparently they had a hot and cold relationship. Do you know more about that?
Yes, and that would be Paul, my friend Paul. So hello, Paul. Thank you for watching. Yes, that's an interesting one, because post Kenneth's death, Fenella would change her stories rather about what it was like. So in one program she'd say one thing, in another program she'd say another, and then when it came to her autobiography, it sort of changed again. So I think there was that tension. I don't know if there was a tension as such. It was more they came to the stage because they're working so much with each other night after night in Pieces of Eight, that they began to try upstaging each other. So Kenneth would ad lib, which she didn't realise was coming, so she sort of left in the dark, so to speak. And then in other things, she'd then try and one up on over him. And I think there are stories of them in the dressing room, things such as that, slamming doors and so forth. But when you see clips such as that, there's obviously a very much a fondness between the two of them. So again, I think there's a bit of old wives' tales which have sort of developed over the years, and as the lady herself kept changing them. So I think there was a friendship, but I think there was also a time when they may have had a bit of an argy-bargy with each other. But I think at the end of it all, I think there was a fondness for each other, and they enjoyed each other's company. But when you're with somebody night after night trying to keep a review fresh as it was, from day one for over a year and a half. It's a bit challenging.
Yes, I mean, I think one sometimes forgets that actors, they're just colleagues like everybody else, and nobody who works in an office or works at all doesn't have a few kind of argy-bargies with their colleagues. It's one that's sort of been answered, but I'm going to ask it anyway because it's from Kevin Geddes, who's next week's speaker. Do you think Kenneth's untimely death sealed his cult status, or would he have gone on to develop it further? Because it does sort of fit in. For me, I mean, there is that sort of cliche of the tragic comedian, the tragic clown. Do you think he's part of that sort of cliche story?
Well, hello to Kevin, and I must say, please do tune in and support Kevin next week because you'll be in for a great presentation and learn all about Fanny and her contemporaries. For the answer to the question, it's an interesting one. Just trying to think about that one because he wasn't actually really a comic; he was a comedy actor. So to compare him with the likes of, say, Tommy Cooper and Morecambe and Byers, and it's he's the comedy actor rather than the comedian. So I would say that based on his appearances through things like Jack and Norrie and Will o' the Wisp for Children, and you had all the radio series, and you had the Just a Minute. So he was continually around in culture and in the communities. So I would say that he was just on the cusp of actually becoming a national treasure at the time. So yes, I would say it was just starting, and I suppose with his untimely death, and then after, it becomes a bit more of a, I was going to say a legend, isn't it? But as Lauren Bacall said, a legend is something that's far, far away. So it's not so much; it's more just as I've demonstrated as a cult. So I would say that yes, it's just grown over time, and particularly with the fondness of different generations coming through who will be showing Kenneth for the first time to one of their children, say, "Oh, let's watch Carry On together. It's on this afternoon on whatever channel," or they might say, "Oh, let's go and sit and watch a Will o' the Wisp." And so he's always there, and repeats on Radio 7 is it, and 4 Extra. He's always there in to listen or watch.
Yes, I'm not sure when the term national treasure in that sense actually started being used. I think it was after his time, but it's one for someone to look up in the OED. Richard's asked, what actors and actresses was he a fan of?
Oh, he liked Charles Laughton. Big fan of Charles Laughton. He was greatly admired Orson Welles, for whom he worked with in Moby Dick. Sorry, I missed that completely out of the theatre question answer. Ingrid Bergman, whom he worked with, they had a very good, well, of course, that was in Captain Brassbound's Conversion. There was a very close link there, and also admired her. I mean, he went to see all the classic films as they are now in the cinema, so he grew up watching all those, all the golden age of Hollywood. And he'd also go to the music hall, Collins Music Hall, which is in Islington Green, which is now Waterstones. He would go and see all the music hall acts there, and he could fondly remember them and talk about them on shows as well. So it's a variety of things. There probably is more which I have forgotten, but definitely Charles Laughton and Orson Welles.
This is something that's quite interesting. An anonymous attendee has just said, who I'm assuming must be one of Ken's newer fans, has just said, you refer to his untimely death. So what happened? So just a quick fill in on.
Right. Kenneth was found dead in his bed by his mother on the morning of the 15th of April 1988, and the coroner's report that it was an overdose of barbiturates. How that was taken, we don't know. There's 2 trains of thought that yes, he did mean to commit suicide. Others think that he was in so much pain he didn't know what he was doing, just took a mouthful and then went to sleep. So that's why it's untimely. He was 62, although he always declared that he didn't want to be around past 65, as he would tell friends like Dame Barbara and things like that. So yes.
Well, thank you. Yeah, it's easy to forget that a lot of people now just know him from his fantastic performances and don't necessarily know him from his life. Okay, this is one that obviously comes up quite a lot, but it's such a fascinating conversation. Someone called Searle says, I often wondered how he and Hugh Paddick got away with such near the mark double entendres as Julian and Sandy. Any thoughts on this?
Well, the producers at the time of BBC Radio just didn't realise. They were just week after week. I think it's always said that they didn't actually realise what was going on, what they were commissioning, and I think it was very much just it's part of its time, really. And because they were two great performers, along with Kenneth Horne, of course, the three of them creating that whole Polari and everything. I think it's just something that was just the norm because you had three great talents performing it, and people at the head of the BBC just didn't realise what was going on, because I understand that John Simmons, who was the producer for Around the Horn, was very staunch and he wouldn't have any nonsense and things such as that. So I think it was just a bit of luck and talent, really, on that one.
And it's always slightly odd what gets a laugh and what doesn't, because camp gets a laugh and cruising gets a laugh, slightly surprisingly, but there's a couple of points where they use gay as a joke and it doesn't, because it's 1968 and it's not.
That's it. So it could be that.
So, but it's amazing that there's ones where they go and talk about going on a cruise, and that does. Someone's asked, does he have a blue plaque anywhere? And I think you know the answer to that.
Oh yes, he's got. I think he has the most. I mean, people can correct me. I think there's at least 5 or 6. So you have an actual English heritage one for Farley Court, which is opposite the entrance to the Band of Souls Planetarium. I don't know if I think the planetarium's still going. There's that one, the English heritage. At Pinewood Studios, he has one in the what was then the Carry On Corridor, I think it was called. I don't know if it still exists, but it's definitely there. There is the plaque in Marchmont Street, which was unveiled by Nicholas Parsons. There's the Comic Heritage plaque, which was on Osnaborough Street, where he died, but that was demolished. We're not sure where the actual original plaque went, but there was a replica made, and it's in the new Diorama Theatre foyer, which is not far from where the building was.
Yeah, that's near Warren Street, isn't it? Yes, I work in Marylebone Library, which would have been his local library, though I suspect he probably thought that the books would be filthy and handled by common people, but I'm sure he went to libraries in his youth. So Dawn Frost says, my favourite Kenneth Williams character was the relatively straight role he played in Carry On Sergeant. So did he regret not being better known for more serious roles? And did he regret being typecast?
I don't think the word regret's correct. I think it's more that he, nearer the end of his life, I think he was more conscious and aware that he was becoming the same old thing on the chat show circuit and things such as that. So I think, and then also, as I said earlier, I think he sort of lost his nerve with acting as well, especially with The Undertaking. So, but as I demonstrated in the last talk, his actual last performance in 1985 for a series of training videos, it was, I find it very touching and a great performance. He could have done so much more. So I think, yes, he did miss the serious acting, and I think it is a shame that he didn't push himself more to go and do a bit more of that. But again, as I say, the work that's coming in, as Michael Anderson told me, who was his former agent, that he was just getting the voiceovers in and the chat shows and things such as that. So there wasn't that quality coming in for him, unfortunately.
Yeah, Matthew Banks says, in a letter to me, when I asked where I could get hold of a copy of a Carry On film, Kenneth told me that it was rubbish and to go and get a copy of Gibbon's Rise and Fall of the Roman Empire. So why do you think he had so little regard for them?
Hello, Matthew. Good to see you here. Thank you for your support. It says thanks to Matthew. Actually, one of the first photos at the start, I don't know if you remember that, the one from 1948 was in Matthew's collection as he's researched into Kenneth's performances in UK. I digress. So it was about Carry On films. Sorry, if you can just remind me that what the question was.
Well, the question was basically because Matthew asked for carry-on film, and Kevin,
right.
and he was told to go and read The Decline and Fall of the Roman Empire. So why do you think he has such little regard for them? Because again, he bangs on about them in the diaries, doesn't he, or the published
Yes.
diary?
Well, I'm not quite sure what year that letter was. So if it was, say, early 80s, then I expect it was a change in culture, and he'd probably seen a few on TV and thought, well, they're just rubbish. I mean, I think from the extracts in the diaries, it did come that he sort of fell out with them in terms of enjoying them. But then again, there are some that he sat down and said, oh, it's quite good, actually. It wasn't bad. And of course, his favourite was Carry On Cowboy. And in one instance, he said it was Carry On Matron. Yeah, I think he'd like to possibly help people to embrace a different culture and help them become an intellectual themselves. So I think he was possibly just trying to influence a younger brain into finding out something that would probably be more substantial in a knowledge base, rather than just going to go and watch an hour and a half comedy, perhaps. I don't know.
So I know some stars who lasted a lot longer than him felt a bit bitter about their payments, didn't they? That they weren't getting.
Well, it was actually Kenneth who was the one who said yes, that they should have the contract, and that that they got the residues from the film. So he was actually the one who said, "Come on, folks, let's do it." So he was forward thinking there, and he knew what he was talking about, but they just didn't go for that clause.
He'd have been very annoyed if he'd seen how many like DVD collections there are and stuff. Do we know when he played in theatre? Did he use his David Hilton, when he played in the theatre, was the way he spoke radically different from that which we know and love in the Carry-Ons and his Jack Show appearances? I guess you
well, sadly for me, I never actually saw any of his performances. I was born in '82. And there are no filmed instances of his theatre work. The nearest we can get to it is his Not an Asp sketch, which was done in full on the Mike Walsh show. But again, that was for review, so it wasn't serious. From contemporaries and friends that I've spoken to who saw the productions, they were pretty much in awe and celebrated. So I think you'll find you did get to Kenneth the actor on stage. I mean, there are some instances where some people say that he would just walk up stage if he was getting bored, going, oh, hello, you're having a good time. And then some people have denied that in the same show. So again, it's stories that you can't clarify. But having looked at his letters in the British Library, his in and out letters, there are notes from people like Frankie Howard, who said, I was in the audience tonight, you were great, and things such as that. So his serious side of acting in the theatre was revered by his peers and contemporaries.
I can't imagine improvising a lot going down well with Ingrid Bergman, but
I think well, that reference that I made was in My Fat Friend, so which was probably a plot that he got pretty bored with anyway. So he may have done it, and the other person didn't remember it. So yeah, so it's one of those.
David Hilton also asked, did his passing seriously affect his mother? I understand he cared for very deeply. I'm guessing it did, but how long did she survive him for?
She died in 1991, so that's about 3 years. I think she was, at that time, she did have a touch of dementia, so that was starting to kick in. So possibly that she may, after that time, have sort of thought he was around and wasn't. But she moved in with her daughter Pat, and and that's where she ended her life, living with her daughter.
And the sister outlived him for quite a long time, didn't she?
Yeah, she died in 1995.
Oh right. Look, Jeffrey Davis asked about his career in Forces Entertainment. Did that feed into the character of Captain Terry in Privates on Parade? That's the character that Dennis Quilley plays in the film, is it? Is that the drag?
Oh, I have to confess, I've never actually seen Private
Oh,
Parade.
you'd love it. Okay, you'd love it. It's
however,
yeah,
I can tell you that one of the people from CSE, a chap called Ray Hammond, he kept scrapbooks and was very much pivotal in assisting Peter Nichols with writing Privates on Parade. And there is in the British Library, in the correspondence, there are letters between Peter, Kenneth, and Ray talking about their memories. I think there's also one about Kenneth actually saying, well, those sort of things didn't happen, and how could you represent my then sort of character in the show like that? So I can't remember the question, but I think yes. So
did influence there's the captain who does all the kind of does Carmen Miranda and Marlene Dietrich and stuff. Although
quite possibly, I think Peter Nichols sort of put a bit of everything in everybody. I don't think they sort of tallied them up from what I can understand. But I haven't watched it. I have to confess, shoot me. But
because Ken didn't actually do that much drag, did he? People always think he did the female voices in Round the Horn, and he didn't. I mean, he didn't do drag that much.
He didn't like dressing up at all. His last appearance in drag was for Rosalind Hammerstein's Cinderella at the London Coliseum. Again, something I missed from the theatre question earlier. But he did do one bit of drag in CSE, and that is a picture of that in the scrapbook.
Okay, I think we'll just round up with one last question, which is from Linda Martin, regarding the dramatisations made in the 20th century where he's been portrayed by various well-known actors. Which performance do you think most closely depicts the real Kenneth Williams?
I think Michael Sheen did a very good job in Fantabulosa. I have to confess it's quite a while since I watched it, but from memory, he's certainly got the mannerisms and things such as that, the characterization. I suppose the ones more in Cleo, Campion and Dick is a bit more of a characterization of Kenneth rather than a serious representative of him. But yes, all keeps his memory alive.
Yeah, no, I remember.
But of course, for me, I always enjoy the real thing. So
yeah,
but
I remember a radio play a few years ago where him and Charles Hawtrey are having tea and Selfridges with their mothers, but I can't remember who played him in that. But I seem to remember that being very funny.
Yes, that was Tittle Tattle. That was written by Martin Hesford, who also wrote Fantabulosa.
Yeah, and of course, Andy has just reminded us of David Benson, who did a brilliant one-man show, which it's called Think No Evil of Us, and it's on YouTube, I believe. It's a
he uploaded that during the pandemic. Yeah,
absolute fabulous tour de force. So do watch that, David Benson. Okay, I'm going to wrap up here. Thank you so much, people attending. There were over 200 fans of Kenneth. Thank you so much for Adam. Thank you so much for doing this, Adam. That was absolutely brilliant. I mean, Kenneth is the first person that we've had two talks about. So, we've done talks on lots of people, Cary Grant, Carol Lombard, Burt Lancaster, but Kenneth is the first one to come back for more. So thank you, Kenneth. Thank you, Kenneth. Yeah, obviously. Thank you, Adam, and good night, everybody.